One Health is an approach to studying disease ecology when you consider the interaction of animals, human, and environment.
It's a collaborative, interdisciplinary approach to solve problems between people and animals and the environment that they share. Animals are companion animals, but it's also livestock, it's also wildlife. But then you get to people, and my gosh, the variation in social values, religion, experiences, unfortunately, political beliefs, education levels. How do you bring all those people, if they have a stake in whatever the defined problem is, together to sit at the table and try to find a solution for the problem that's been identified? And then the environment, I know it's also complex because, there's climatic issues, there's biota, there's geography, particularly when you're talking about infectious diseases. Not every disease exists universally around the globe. So that's what makes One Health really challenging.
So my name's Don Hornstein. I'm a chaired professor at the UNC School of Law, and I also hold a joint appointment at the UNC program in ecology and the environment over.
My name's Bill Pan. I am an associate professor in the Duke Global Health Institute and the Nicholas School of Environment.
My name is Suzanne Kennedy Stoskov. I'm retired. I actually graduated from Michigan State with my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine in 1976. I've been doing this for a long time. But it's an old term. The history of it goes back hundreds of years. And the kind of comparative aspects of animals and humans. And then it was sort of like brought forth again in the 1960s. And then when it gained traction, say around 2000, 2001, and people were starting to talk about it and trying to suck me in, I go, well, it's what I do. So for me, it wasn't a big deal. But for a lot of people, it was like, oh, they hadn't thought about how everything was connected.
The onset of awareness and law and concern involving climate just was non-existent, to be honest, when I was practicing at the Department of Justice, and not just by the Department of Justice, but by EPA and others. In the mid-1980s, early 1990s, climate, which is our principal huge problem now, multifaceted, multidimensional, definitely interdisciplinary, was not even a blip. That said, there definitely was, when sort of early environmental law took root in this country, there was institutionalized this idea, which now not just undergirds climate change, but undergirds things like One Health, this notion of interconnectedness that really almost becomes boundless. I mean, the extent of interconnectedness is what sort of distinguishes so many things on the climate side, so many things on sort of the nature-human interface side.
In the gold mining work, what we find is, gold mining is rampant through the Amazon. It is the leading cause of mercury pollution in the world. And what happens is the gold is extracted with mercury, because mercury is an amalgamator of gold. And so when you use mercury with mining, it creates an amalgam, like a little malleable piece of gold and mercury metal, and you can burn it, and the mercury burns away, but the gold stays as a liquid form. But that mercury goes in the atmosphere, goes back into the aquatic environment, and you end up having very high levels of mercury in fish and other wildlife. And so every time you see a problem with, beware of the mercury you eat in fish, like in tuna and swordfish, this often is sourced from gold mining, because mercury travels thousands and thousands of kilometers, not only in watersheds, but in the atmosphere. And so is a very strong One Health problem in terms of, this human activity impacting both human health because it's a neurotoxicant, but as well as animal health because it has the same exact effects on animals as it does to humans.
But how are you going to solve a problem if you're dealing with feral swine who are carrying Brucella suis and all the ramifications of, yes, it's a zoonotic disease. Yes, it can infect domestic pigs. And we're the second biggest swine production state in the country. Well, I mean, frankly, if you don't look at all the pieces of the puzzle, you're not going to succeed if there's pieces or expertise missing at the table. What's causing these catastrophic outbreaks of various paramyxoviruses like Nipah and Hendra in Southeast Asia, or even the coronaviruses, the SARS virus, it's how we are manipulating our environments, destroying the environments of the animals that carry these diseases without any consequences to themselves.
A good example is, one of the things that I worked on early in my career and then I wrote on early in my academic career were pesticides. And there's probably no greater contrast between the world view that was taken originally when Rachel Carson first wrote and launched, almost single-handedly modern environmentalism and focusing on pesticides, of course, in Silent Spring. But if you look at that book, it's not just an expose of pesticides problems. It's the lack of interdisciplinarity, the lack of interconnectedness between how we grow food, for example, and nature, and how we take these approaches like pesticides that will just destroy nature, hence, the Silent Spring. That launched environmentalism like almost half a century ago. And looking back at that half century, hate to say it, I'm reasonably confident to say we've learned nothing. Now we're talking about insect apocalypses. We're in the middle of a songbird apocalypse. These things were the types of collapses that Rachel Carson was worried about that we're now experiencing.
I think in many ways why it hasn't been as successful as strong advocates want it to be, because they're trying to legislate from the top down, and there's too many government stakeholders that are very protective of what they do. And you've got to talk, you've got to share information, you got to share information across state lines. But everybody's so worried that information will get out on social media and it will have a spin on it that makes them look bad or makes the problem a lot worse than it is. So people have a tendency that they don't want to pool information. Health has a meaning to everyone. It's all health, and she's absolutely right. How do you get that message across?
We have to overcome this from how we teach to how we practice. And until we do that, it's going to be a big problem in terms of trying to achieve, this kind of systems-based One Health thinking to attack problems.
The world would be a lot worse without environmental law. Getting rid of lead in gasoline in my lifetime might have been one of the most consequential public health breakthroughs that stemmed entirely from environmental law. If you look at non-greenhouse gas air pollutants in the United States, the air is so much cleaner now, in 2020s than it was when I was going to college, when I was your age. Despite, 2 to 3 times as many people in the United States, magnified by an increasing amount of mechanization and cars and so on, we have cleaner air despite all of that.
Assessing somebody very quickly, what would it mean to them to grasp the One Health concept? What would benefit them personally? What is it they're passionate about? Whether it's the birds in their backyard that they're feeding, which, or is it the trees being cutting down, cleared for building, and losing wildlife in their area. And then you can tell a One Health story.